Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my Memorial Day weekend 2025 am reading video. I am putting this up a few days late, so I figure even if there might be some construction noise that you hear going on outside my building, I should just go with it because we gotta, keep the ball rolling here. As always with these AM reading videos, I'm going to start by reviewing a short story in a literary journal. I am currently reading from the Cincinnati Review. I'll just go right into here and say that we are on the fall 2024 edition, and I read The Girl Who Loved Boyan Slat by Paula Closson Buck. So this story is epistolary, and it's this character who is writing letters to this real Dutch young environmentalist who I admittedly hadn't heard of before, but he made waves, especially with I think going into the oceans, taking stock of all the plastic there, and trying to find a way to get rid of it because it's so, dangerous to have so much plastic in the ocean. And our protagonist is in Kentucky and lives in an area where there could be danger of flooding and other catastrophes. And so she also is this budding environmentalist, but it seems like she has far fewer opportunities for her activism to shine. Like she's working at the Piggly Wiggly and trying to get people to use reusable bags, and that's not working. And at one point during a storm, she takes all of the plastic out of her mother's house and like throws it into the storm, but it just ends up, washing downstream. And by happenstance, there's a bunch of plastic trash from their neighbors upstream that ends up in their yard. So I think it shows how difficult it is for environmentalism to flourish, and it also shows a character who can, be a little more on the, well, extreme is such a loaded word, but I think as the story goes on through these letters, you see that her actions do get more and more out there. And so, yeah, it was interesting. I think, there is something, about the epistolary style that I think in a novel I wouldn't be able to sustain. It wouldn't sustain very well, and it would feel too gimmicky, but I think a short story is a decent medium to sort of, play with style, and it's a way to, like, get an exposition without it feeling too honky, I think. This was an interesting ride. I also finished To Be a Jew Today, A New Guide to God, Israel, and the Jewish People by Noah Feldman. I finished it. I'm not sure how well I can talk about it. I'm very much looking forward to my synagogue's book club meeting, I think next week. This is a jam-packed book filled with sort of various ideas about how different strands of Jews deal with the idea of God, and then Israel, and then the idea of Jewish peoplehood. And a lot of those are in flux, so that, like, he creates these categories. I kind of question, like, the veracity of, like, trying to peg Jews down into categories. There's, like, the irony of saying, well, I'm not going to say, this is how the Orthodox feel and this is how the seculars feel, but then he makes his own categories about traditionalists and progressives and the evolutionists are somewhere in between. I think it comes down to, especially, I mean, it's easy to say for progressives and evolutionaries or evolutionists who, like, want to deal more with the changing modern world, which can be relatively different than how religion was perceived and written down in the books of the Torah and the writings and the Talmud and so forth. But even for traditionalists, because they are kind of interacting with the world around us, especially in Israel, and trying to actually get a foothold of power in Israel, the modern state of Israel, that their mores are changing more than they would want to admit to. And he just brings in everything in the kitchen sink. He talks about, he's analyzing everything from biblical stories and then bringing in many more modern Jewish thinkers. Maimonides, I think, is a huge influence on a lot of the book. Maimonides was sort of, in a way, a rock star of, I don't know, he wouldn't have said it like that, but of the Middle Ages. He was sort of the rabbi and a thinker that everyone kind of turned to. But Maimonides was pre-modern, and he also talks about how, you know, how the Jewish people's relationship with the rest of the world changed significantly, starting probably first with Enlightenment, that when as more Jews sort of were accepted as citizens or semi-citizens and started of European usually countries and started taking you know, more of a role in secular pursuits. That's how they really became more known in Enlightenment thinking. And then things go on from there as, you know, Jewish concerns become a part of the broader history and culture of the world. But yeah, definitely looking forward to what my book club would have to say. I mean, it probably would behoove me to even read the book all over again, although I just don't have time for that with so much to read. But I am definitely hoping, too, that I'll have something, you know, I'll be back on this channel and have something, you know, definitive and, you know, enlightening to say for my maybe Midrash wrap-up video, because I read this for my nonfiction pick for this readathon where we're seriously looking at religion. Next, I am reading Songs for the Brokenhearted by Ayelet Tsabari. This was one of my big 2024 anticipated releases that I am finally getting to. I'm very excited about it. Ayelet Tsabari is an author who I've read her short stories and her memoir, and this is her first novel. And all of this material centers particularly around Yemeni Jews in Israel, which is her heritage, and I think she really wants to write sort of the definitive or the first Yemeni Israeli Jewish novel of Israel that, you know, even though I think mores are changing, you know, there's still sort of an Ashkenazi sort of establishment that, you know, even in literary culture to a degree that is better known. And this is, you know, the minority voice, although really, well, Mizrahi voices in general, which are Jews who are of Middle Eastern descent and came to Israel from Middle Eastern countries like Yemen. They're not the minority in Israel, but culturally they have been. And a lot of that might be covered in this book due to the founding of the state. And what that means, that encompasses one storyline in particular in 1950, which takes place in a camp. Because as more and more Mizrahi Jews were coming in droves to the very nascent state of Israel for various reasons, there were a lot of Middle Eastern countries that were kicking them out. Others, like a lot of the Yemeni Jews, were just very religious and wanted to come to the Holy Land now that it was more viable to do so. And they found it, and I'm sure a lot of people found it relatively disappointing because they're shunted into these camps as the state is, the state and the Ashkenazi establishment that founded the state in large part are trying to scramble to, you know, create this housing. And there are also, you know, racist Moors in place as well. The general background of that story, which isn't, it isn't the main story, but it's definitely sort of the formative story of this book. We are following Saida and Yaqub, who are in a illicit relationship because Saida is married and not to Yaqub. Saida is a singer. She sings Yemeni sort of folk songs. It's sort of in Arabic, and that's sort of a tradition, I think, you know, it's a cultural tradition in Yemen, and the women in particular sang sort of domestic folk songs in Arabic because, you know, that was their life, and the men sang more songs in Hebrew about religious topics because they were the ones who were religiously learned. But I think there's a culture of singing Yemeni women that Tsabari is very interested in, and that's who Saida belongs to. And during this time in the camp, I mean, the Israeli establishment also was very secular socialist Zionist at the time, so there were a lot of the socialist mores about, or the kibbutzim mores about, children living in their own nursery away from parents, which was another thing, the Yemenis and other traditional groups didn't like so much. But a lot of the children, including Saida's son Raphael, were in this nursery. And at one point, Saida goes to visit him and finds out that he had been taken to the hospital and died. Or that's the story that's told, but actually there is this this reality in Israel, this systemic crime, which I think still isn't talked about as much as it should be or acknowledged and dealt with as much as it should be. And I would hope maybe this book would help change that tide. But during, these formative years of Israel, there were all of these, poorer, larger Mizrahi families coming in, and the Ashkenazim had these European-style racist ideas about them. Well, the irony, thinking of how the Ashkenazim were treated in the 19th century in America, like my ancestors. But anyway, they did take some lighter-skinned children out of Yemeni communities and Mizrahi communities and, set them up for adoptions, largely with childless and often Holocaust survivor Ashkenazi families, but without consent, obviously, from the parents. So this is something that the main family of this book thinks is what happened to them. And Saida, for the rest of her life is mourning this son who, was abruptly, through death or adoption or whatever, was taken from her. But the main story takes place in 1995 with Saida's daughter Zohara, who I think, Tsabari, I think, was trying to broaden her scope a bit with writing a novel, but Zohara, I think, reading her other stuff, is probably pretty similar to Tsabari herself. Even to the fact that she lost her father at a young age, and that was something that's always grieved her. And she was someone who struggled a lot with her Yemeni heritage, and like her ideas, her formative ideas growing up in Israel were that she was feeling sort of repressed and didn't understand why, and it took to moving outside of the country to sort of, grapple with her Yemeni roots and try to understand them. But in this story, she is called back to Israel after, living abroad in New York. She's doing a PhD program. She had a brief marriage and divorce that her family barely knows about. But she's called back because her mother, Saida, abruptly died. And so she had a tense relationship with her mother, and I think that's something that's going to be challenged and is starting to be challenged as she is coming back to Israel for the Shiva, the mourning period, and trying to put these affairs in order and trying to understand more about her mother's life and her mother's singing. And so she's, the crux of the novel. She's what's pushing the main storyline forward. And then, but as a secondary character in the 1995 storyline, we're following her nephew, Yoni, who is about 17 years old. And he, I think, is very much Tsabari's commentary on the right-wing movement that was growing in, like, its sort of formative years were in Israel at the time. Because 1995 was supposed to be a very hopeful time. This was the time of the Oslo Accords, when the Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was moving the country into a peace settlement with the Palestinians. That was supposed to be what was supposed to happen. Rabin was assassinated by a young right-wing man called Yigal Amir, who was a Yemeni man, a religious right-wing nationalist. Also during this time and during the book, terrorist groups like Hamas were trying to upend the peace talks by the Second Intifada, where they were blowing up buses and, restaurants and school lunchrooms and that sort of thing. But anyway, I do think Yoni is Tsabari trying to understand how someone like Yigal Amir could have come to be. Although I guess I'm questioning how well she's going to be able to do it, because Yoni is such a very secondary character. This is very much Zohara's story. She has the most chapters. She's in first person, Yoni's in third person, so it already feels like Tsabari's like, I gotta keep some distance. I don't know. So that's, although she also does that for, you know, the characters in the 50s as well. Zohara is the only first person narrator. And I imagine there's decent reasons to say, yeah, she's the main character. But I don't know. I think she's biting off a lot, and I think I'm really enjoying it. I think it can be very challenging. I think she means to question, you know, one-dimensional, jingoistic narratives in Israel that when somebody like Yoni falls for them can be very dangerous. But also, you know, and talk about a lot of the nuances for Yemeni Jews and for Israelis in general, especially in 95. So I think I'm really going to like this as I want to keep going with it. And the final book I have to share that I definitely can't ramble on about as much is Grief is for People by Sloane Crosley. You know, it's a shorter, smaller book, so that's one reason. It's also a memoir about Crosley, who actually is an author. One of her novels is on my TBR list. But this is a memoir about her losing a friend to suicide, and it's also wrapped up in a theft that she experienced at the time. So she's parsing through a lot of her feelings about these losses. And that's all I'm going to say right now about this book because I have read it for the BookTube Prize. So the BookTube Prize was started by Robert Sheard back in 2019 as a way for the literary book community, especially on BookTube, to come together and judge the best of literary fiction and nonfiction published in the US in English the year before. So this year we are judging 2024 releases. And in this, the second round of 4 rounds, I am reading Nonfiction Group D. We start at the beginning of the year with 2 long lists of 48 books apiece, and then we whittle them down through 4 rounds until we get to a winner and runners-up. So also, my ballot is due very soon. And anyway, yeah, I'm in the second round. I'm judging this book. I have to compare it to the 5 other books on the ballot and then rank them. And that will, you know, help decide, me and my other fellow judges aggregated will help decide what will move on to the next round. But until we get to the next round, I have to keep my lips zipped so that I don't, you know, maybe influence my fellow judges with my thoughts so that we can keep this as honest as possible. But I did give some preliminary thoughts on all 6 of my books in a video I made before starting reading this ballot. I will link to that video and more information on the BookTube Prize down below. And that about covers it for me now. I'm going to go ahead and try and pretend we're not in the tail end of May. I have a bunch of more videos I hope to put up. I'm sure I'll only get to, you know, 1 or 2 of them in May, actually. But so I think my last video of May will probably be my author's answer video, where I turn to AuthorTube and a big questionnaire I have going on there, courtesy of JD Archer, that I'm answering month by month, question by question. So stay tuned for that video. And I hope you are all having a great time as we get to the end of the month with your reading. Those of you doing readathons, but like maybe mid-rush, or those of you dashing toward the finish line, if you're still dashing toward the finish line with the BookTube Prize quarterfinals, I'm with you, and I'm looking forward to ultimately hearing your thoughts, I guess in maybe a week or 2 by this point, on all of these books. And thanks so much for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time.